Hello Internet, Saskorkowski, and welcome to part 3, the midpoint in our review/game diary/war stories for the Traveler mini-campaign, The Mystery of BT-SHT 365. The title I enjoy less each and every time I say it, no matter how much fun we had playing the adventure. Today's pulse-pounding episode will cover Thalassa, which is the second half of the second act. This one takes us out of the Sindal subsector and into the Depres sector, and out from a rural setting and into an urban setting. It gives us some combat, some roleplay, and some investigation. And while I have and will complain more and more about this scenario, the diversity of the settings as well as the diversity of the different skills that it requires at different times is part of the reason why I decided to play this adventure despite my reservations. This portion is pretty short. It only took us about 4 hours in order to play it, so as always I'm going to offer my criticisms and my tips and my suggestions as a game master who has completed this adventure. And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm going to be giving this one to you from a player's side of things, as well as reenacting that time that Moto brought a knife to a laser gun fight. Once again, our crew of heroes consists of Ignis, captain and pilot, Grista, our Vargar co-pilot, Jax, who's in charge of comms, our medic and security officer, Moto, the sensor operator, and Vince, our rockstar ship steward and gunner. Joining them are Jerry, a meat popsicle who doesn't really say that much, and Coraline, our noblewoman patron who's hired the crew to find the missing planet that her family once ruled. Their ship is the Cygnus Crucible, a heavily modified free trader that they call home. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players out there, if you ever want to experience this scenario, you need to stop now. But send your game master this way to see how to best run this adventure for you, and also get to laugh at all the stupid jokes that you're going to miss out on because you stopped watching. Okay, Game Masters, let's get this thing started. But first I want to apologize about something. I had missed something in the last episode, and I had planned on putting it in there, and somewhere in the writing and editing and recording and all that stuff, I had missed just one little detail, and I didn't realize it till after I had posted the video, like 10 minutes after I had posted it. So let's go ahead and correct that and rewind to the space battle that ended our last episode. During the fight, Moto was handling the sensors and trying to jam their enemy's weapons lock. Between the Crucible's crappy sensors and the fact that the player is just supernaturally dice-cursed, he was failing this role round after round. Now, one thing about Moto is that he has been through a lot of trauma, and the player decided that in cases of extreme stress and when he's combined with failing a lot of rolls, Moto would have a very small chance of having some sort of mental break. Now, this isn't anything that's in the Traveler's rules. This is something that the player decided that they wanted to do for themselves. See my video on the Flaws Addict if you want more information on that sort of thing. But the player decided that due to Moto's frustration from the fact this was definitely a stressful situation and he kept failing his rolls, that should warrant a save. And of course, he failed it. So suddenly terrified and not sure if he was back on the battles on Ace, Moto fled the bridge and holed up in the safest place that he knew, ready to defend his life.
Okay, Jerry, it's just you and me now. We're gonna make our last stand and die as brothers.
Once the battle was done and Moto sort of came out of it, he tried to shrug it off, saying that he'd really just run back to the engine room in order to take care of something. Jax, however, checked all the security footage and he knew the truth. So anyway, that was just something that I forgot to mention on the last episode. Now that that's taken care of, back to this one. After a week's time, the travelers emerged from jump space in the Thalassa system. Thalassa is a water world with artificial floating islands and is pretty cool. However, the downport was currently getting hit by a massive hurricane, meaning that landing there was going to be difficult to do. Now, this little scene is meant to inject just a little shot of excitement. The pilot having to make several pilot checks in order to fly through this hurricane and land the ship. Now, I had assumed that because the travelers really weren't on any sort of time scale, there was no need that they had to land right away, that the logical thing they would do is just kind of stick around in orbit, hang out for a few days until after the storm had passed, and then they could land at their leisure once it was gone. No need to risk themselves by flying into a hurricane if they don't have to. Ignis, however, said hold my beer and decided to land. Moto decided to help him out by running a sensors check to create a task chain. However, Moto, for the previously mentioned crappy ship sensors and dice cursed, failed his sensor check, giving Ignis a -1 to all of his pilot checks. Now the module states that a pilot must make 3 pilot checks at difficulty 10 in order to land the ship, and 10 is actually a pretty hard roll. Remember, we're doing this all by rolling 2d6 and adding it up. Now the worst that can happen if they fail is a little bit of light damage to the ship, maybe a little bit of light damage to the people inside the ship. It's not meant to be anything that could actually hurt the game or kind of hurt the progress of it, just kind of inject a little bit of excitement like I was talking about. Now, unlike Moto's player, Ignis's player has supernaturally great dice rolls, so even with the -1 due to the bad sensor check, the player made their 3 rolls, and they were in order 14, 13, and 12, which means that he flew down into the eye of that storm, whipped the ship around with the momentum of the storm, and then just backwards Tokyo drifted it into the landing bay like a boss. The comms exploded with all this cheering as everyone in the downport tower was just cheering him on for some of the best flying that they had ever seen, and the videos of the landing quickly went viral around the spaceport.
Yeah, I am a leaf on...
Don't say that. Death only follows that statement. The Thalassa downport is pretty interesting. However, there's no actual map that's given for it, which is unfortunate, so I had to make my own. The port consists of 2 giant stacked rings with hangars along the outside. Since these hangars are big enough to handle 1,000-ton starships, that means that they're huge. So I picture the whole structure to stand about 150 meters high. In the middle, connected by sky bridges, is the control tower, where customs and the port authority and the offices are all located. The blue area is the concourse, which is the town inside the starport. That's at law level 5, meaning that up to mesh armor and small sidearms are okay. Meanwhile, outside the starport is the Star Town, which like the rest of the planet is a strict law level 9. No weapons or body armor allowed at all. The travelers are parked in docking bay 25B, which is up on the 2nd level. As the crew was beginning all their standard shutdown and maintenance on the ship like that, Ignis was invited to the pilot's lounge, where he was bought mini drinks for that awesome landing.
Yeah, guys, you enjoy doing all the work around the ship. I'm gonna go get free booze and get told how cool I am, so sniff you jerks later.
However, while he's never failed a pilot check, it should be noted that Ignis has never made a carouse check, so he quickly became seriously drunk. Meanwhile, Jack's picked up collapsible fuel tanks for the ship just in case they jumped to this possibly empty system and found no way to refuel and they wouldn't get trapped there. Grista and Vince went out shopping for a good sniper rifle out of the back of any of the other ships that were in the downport to see if they might be selling something on the sly. Once all this was done, Coraline wanted to go visit the local task hall to see if there was any information on the system that they were planning to visit. Now, researching in the task hall requires 3 computer check rolls, all of 8, to get all the information that they need. Now, because making multiple checks with the same skill really just increases the overall chance of failure, I say that you allow this one to be a task chain, where, if you have a good result, that gives you a plus to the next roll and to the next roll after that, making it easier to do. Or you could do it where if they make a good roll, you just have each effect be a different piece of information that they got. So if they roll an 8, they get 1 piece of information. If they get a 9, they got 2. And if they got a 10, they got all 3 pieces of information. It doesn't require that they make a lot of rolls and really just increase their chances of missing something. So the travelers learned that 15 weeks ago, a Serpent-class scout ship called the Thalassa had explored that system. The mission was financed by the General Development Corporation, and the ship is currently docked in the port in Bay 37A. The registered captain, a Charles Karbatkin, isn't listed as being someone who's staying in the task hostel, which means that he's either likely staying on his ship or staying at the Advantage Hotel. Because there's a brewhouse tavern across the street from it, Coraline suggests that the group meet up there and get some lunch. Now, the brewhouse tavern is an optional scene, but the module does give us a menu of their local cuisine, and my players got an absolute kick out of this.
Yeah, I'll have the garlic fried seaweed rings, a jump tank, a snail burger, and a Coke. You guys have Coke, right? This ain't one of those Pepsi systems, is it?
Asking around, the travelers learn that Captain Karbatkin is a regular that shows up in the Brewhouse Tavern, and he's also dating one of the waiters there, but no one has seen either of those two in several days. Now, I don't recommend that you say it's several days for obvious reasons that are going to be obvious in a bit. Go ahead and just say that nobody has seen either of them today. At this point, the module assumes that the travelers are going to leave the Brewhouse Tavern and go to the Advantage Hotel and, talk to Captain Karbakin and find out what he learned when he visited the system and any information that he has about that, but as you can probably guess, that is not at all what my players decided to do. Vince paid the brewhouse waitress a generous tip and told her to call him once the captain showed up to the restaurant. He also told her to go ahead and give him a call when she was done with her shift, and he would be willing to give her a private tour of their starship, most notably the bedroom. The party decided to check out the captain's ship and see what they might find out in the hangar, while Moto offered to escort the still drunk Ignis back to the Crucible. So because this wasn't going at all the way the module expected it to go, and once again it called for some improvisation to go ahead and get the game back on track and keep it moving, also I decided to go ahead and escalate it. As Moto and Ignis were walking around to the ship, they spotted two shady-looking guys exiting the Crucible's hangar and step into an elevator. Moto made a recon check and noticed that one of them had augmented eyes and had a laser carbine hidden underneath his armored trench coat. Worried who these armed strangers were, they went ahead and called the rest of the crew back to the Crucible and also called the port security to report that somebody had been inside their hangar. Jax verified that nobody had entered the ship and it didn't look like anything had been damaged or stolen, and the security told them they couldn't arrest the guys for just stepping into the hangar if they actually hadn't messed with the ship or damaged anything, but they were definitely going to be on the lookout for them because that laser weapon was definitely forbidden there.
You know, guys, we know that Captain Karbakin was working for Jedico, and we know that somebody's been trying to kill Coraline, and now there's these two goons that are snooping around. Maybe we should go ahead and talk to that captain now instead of just waiting around.
So my trick worked. The players decided that they needed to go ahead and speed things up and go to the Advantage Hotel, which is what they needed to do to keep the adventure going. However, because they were now worried that somebody might show up and mess with their ship, they elected to split the party. Jax and Ignis decided to stay with the Crucible while the rest of the party went on to the hotel. Now, a lot of players out there say that players should never ever split up the party, but I disagree with that. There are definitely certain times when players should split up the party, and to me this was one of them. This made a lot of logical sense, so the fact that they split it up was actually very good role-playing on their part. It's just kind of a bummer because two of them are now going to miss out on the action. For the hotel, we get a rather simple map of the lobby, though I did add an elevator here. Grista, who was sick of sleeping aboard the ship, decided to get a room at the Advantage Hotel, and once all that was done, she chatted up the clerk and discovered which room the captain was staying in. But at that moment, the elevator door opened, the two goons stepped out. Seeing the player characters, they immediately opened fire, starting the whole attack off with a stun grenade. Most of the group was stunned by this grenade except for Moto. Now, one of the goons had a laser carbine and a heavy revolver, while the other drew a pair of machine pistols, and it was up to Moto to single-handedly stop them. But real fast, let me tell you something about Moto. As a former scout and barbarian, Moto likes to prepare for any situation that he might find himself in, and he takes a lot of pride in having a lot of different go bags for different environments that could be. Snow planet, got a go bag. Desert planet, got a go bag for that too. Jungle planet, also got a go bag. Moto is prepared no matter what comes his way. However, this evidently doesn't extend to law levels as well. Moto's primary weapon is a mazer pistol. It is his pride and joy and is super awesome. However, it's also illegal just about anywhere that Moto might go, so he can't carry it around at a starport. So you would think that Moto, being such a prepared guy, would have kind of a cache of some lower tech weapons that he could carry around in places where he can't carry his mazer pistol, but he can still carry some sort of weapon. Especially when he is the one that knows for a fact that there are two people here that are carrying laser weapons that look like they're going to be trouble for him. You would think that, but you'd also be wrong. So, facing down two toughened goons that had better weapons and better armor than Moto did, Moto drew the one weapon that he had left.
Okay, punks, let's dance.
It went about as well as you'd expect. Actually better, because Moto ended up surviving the encounter, which surprised everybody in the room that he survived this. But he did keep the two bad guys occupied long enough that the rest of the crew was able to get over the effects of the stun grenade and be able to shoot these two bad guys with extreme prejudice. Once these two goons were dead and alarms were blaring and there was one person in the hotel that was hit by a stray laser round and they were dead, and the person behind the counter was still unconscious from the stun grenade, the players decided that they only had a few minutes before the port security arrived that they could run upstairs and check out the captain's room and see if there was anything important they could find before they had to answer a lot of uncomfortable questions. Once they arrived on the 3rd floor, they noticed that a lot of the cameras were disabled and the captain's door was slightly open. Inside the room, they discovered the captain and his lover both dead from laser shots. They also found his mag rail pistol and a psi blade, which, like all the weapons that I'm showing, all came from the central supply catalog, which means that Game Master is going to have those books if they want to have stats for all the cool gear that this module keeps throwing at them. The travelers also discovered the entry codes for his docked ship, as well as an empty box that looked exactly like the 2 boxes that carried the black orbs from back in Homestead. However, there wasn't any orb inside of it.
Okay, so there was another one of those orbs here, but they left the box. And if those 2 dudes stole it, why didn't they have the orb on them? What, did they come here, kill these 2 guys, steal the orb, take it away somewhere, and then come back to the hotel and we just happened to catch them while they were leaving the 2nd time? That don't make no sense. Where the hell is the orb?
The module doesn't explain this at all, and it really needs to, so this is the way that I was able to work around it. After stashing all their stuff in Grista's new room, the player characters had to talk to the port security, and there were enough witnesses in the lobby security footage that was able to verify that the travelers, all acted in self-defense, and that these 2 guys happened to be the same 2 guys that the travelers had reported earlier, so they really weren't in trouble for anything that happened. In fact, they were complimented for taking care of 2 bad people. But going back further on the footage, they were able to see that shortly after those 2 men had left the Crucible, they had entered the hotel with a woman that had a cybernetic arm. Based off what Coraline knew, this is Silvaria Marios, the villain for the adventure, so we're working in some foreshadowing here. The 2 goons and Silvaria went upstairs, presumably to the captain's room, killed him, and a few minutes later Silvaria left with the orb tucked under her arm. Then, running some facial recognition software, the port security learned that Silvaria had already left in another Serpent-class ship, which was registered to the Jedico Corporation. So that explains why the orb wasn't there with the 2 goons that were presumably the ones that stole it but didn't have the orbs on them, and it was also to work in a little bit of foreshadowing about the villain. That done, and armed with the entry codes to get aboard the captain's ship, they headed aboard and checked the flight logs, and they learned several interesting details. The ship did go to BT-SHT 365 a few weeks earlier, and I added that it was using the star map that the travelers had discovered in Homestead. The world there isn't the Tech Level 12 garden world that's described on the map, but a barren desert with lingering radiation and viral contamination. The ship landed in a ruined city and it picked up 3 black orbs, and then it refueled and flew all the way back to Homestead, where it delivered 2 black orbs as well as the map to one of the Jedico representatives there. And at that point it had also changed its computer records to show that it only picked up 2 black orbs because it looked like the captain wanted to keep one for himself. It should also be noted that player characters really did consider the idea of keeping the ship for themselves. I mean, they had full access to it, and the captain and owner of the ship was dead, so, hey, free ship. But they decided that it would look a little suspicious since they were involved in a shootout with the people that had killed this captain, so it's probably pretty obvious they didn't actually own the ship, and they didn't want to cause any trouble with the port authority because they had another mission on their hands. So Game Masters, prepare for this just in case your own group decides that they want to keep the ship for themselves. In fact, they're probably going to want to keep the ship for themselves. That's what travelers do. So if you decide to let them keep it, that's cool. Knock yourself out. But if you don't want them to keep this ship, you should prepare some reason beforehand as to why it might not be a good idea, and maybe have Coraline tell them the reason that they probably shouldn't be taking the ship right now, because that's going to cause all sorts of problems, as a way to dissuade them from stealing the ship, once again, if you just don't want them to have it. That done, the player characters loaded back onto their ship and jumped to the system that this missing planet is at, thus ending Act 2 of the adventure. Overall, we had a lot of fun with this portion of the adventure, and I really did enjoy the change of setting and pace. Now, one tiny nitpick is on the hotel map, it shows the hotel as being 3 stories, but earlier in the scene it says that the hotel is 5. Again, we have the issue of so much gear in this scenario with stuff that requires that the Game Master have access to the central supply catalog in order to know how to use it or what all it is, meaning that Game Masters now have to buy a full hardback book just to go with this little $2 scenario. Also, the ship that was used, the Serpent-class scout ship, they're going to have access to High Guard in order to get all the information on that ship, when a regular scout ship from the core book would have worked just fine. And while it's not necessary to have this book, the restaurant and the hotel both come from going port side, which I think is kind of fun that they are using all this information from the other books, and they do not need going port side in order to run this adventure. I just kind of like the fact that they used them. The whole plot using these black orbs doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make sense why the captain would then take them back to Homestead and how they ended up in this crappy town that was 1,000 kilometers from the only starport on the planet. Like, what do these black orbs do? Why did he bring them there? How did they end up in this town? None of this is ever explained throughout the entire adventure, so game masters are going to have to figure this out for themselves. And if these two goons were the ones that were supposed to have killed the captain and then stolen the black orb, why didn't these goons have the black orb on them? Why can't the player characters find the black orb once these two guys are dead? Once again, that's never explained. The module could greatly use a game master section with a backstory that sort of gives the whole story for game masters, and it doesn't leave them guessing and have to read through the whole module trying to piece it all together themselves. Just gives it all to them in one nice, clean, clear space, but that's not provided at all. Next, it could really use a little bit more foreshadowing. Notice I have mentioned that in every single video. Silvaria Marios is the main villain for this adventure, and the first time her name ever appears in the entire scenario is when those two agents are discovered at the hotel, and they're said to be her agents. But there's no way that the player characters are even going to know this at this point. So the suggestion that I have for you is if the player characters search the bodies of these two agents, maybe they'll find some sort of data tablet or something on it with messages from Silvaria that is instructing them to kill the captain, deliver the black orb to her, and also includes photos of Coraline with orders to kill her, as well as photos of the player characters to go ahead and kill them too because of their association.
Doing that tells the player characters that 1, there's a villain, 2, what the villain's name is, and 3, that the bad guys are now gunning for them instead of just their patron now. It gives a bit of foreshadowing for the future while also upping the stakes.
Well, that is it for today's episode. Join us next time as the travelers face off with killer robots in a not-so-abandoned space station in Act 3, Highport.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of this series or some of our other videos like game reviews and how-tos, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, travelers, you have a great day. That snail burger was a lot better than I was expecting it to be, and I am going to eat there again in the future. However, I'm going to have to bring my own Coke next time because, Pepsi sucks.